Sweet revelation.
Hey everyone, welcome to the episode today. It is Wednesday, November 5th. We just had election day last night. It didn't turn out too well for Republicans, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, share the podcast. So today I'm going to be explaining the Democrat victory. It's all about tyrannical socialism versus individual liberty. And that tyrannical socialism is going to come in the form of a technocracy, and it's fueled by AI. And the basic premise is, what are people going to do when there are no jobs left, when human labor has been displaced? So the election of the first socialist mayor of a major U.S. city is the canary in the coal mine for freedom and liberty, as well as prosperity for the American citizen. Democrats like Zohran Mamdani, Abigail Spanberger, and Sherrill used Trump and Trump derangement syndrome in a basic way, and as well as the shutdown, to fool the electorate into voting for Cloward and Piven destruction of America, while robbing you of your tax dollars. And you're going to see how this all shapes up in the next few years, because you're going to need tax dollars to pay for the universal basic income for people that are out of work. So we got 34 headlines to get through today, mostly about the election, but there's other news as well. I want to engage you. I want to ask you not only to engage the channel, but check out episode 128 of Tuesdays with Perry last night, where Perry and I discussed some breaking news, which I'm going to go over today, which is going to surprise you. And that is not only the election crisis here domestically, but also in the Western Hemisphere, the showdown over Venezuela, which is going to become another flashpoint. We didn't think it was going to be that. We thought it was going to be Ukraine. But a lot of the machinations of the New World Order are coming into play, because by hook or by crook, they're not going to give up on their New World Order agenda. And that's what the New World Order is. It's really right now an agenda, at least until December 25th, 2030, when those things come into play. So let's see if we can't get the headlines rolling here. I'm going to start off with some good news before the bad news. So we're going to start out with a New York Post article, former Vice President Dick Cheney dead at 84. Now, we talked about this briefly last night with Perry. Perry is still on the bandwagon for extraordinary rendition and torture. I, of course, am not. Everybody has the right to feel the way they feel about how the government, American government, should perform. But Dick Cheney was the architect of 9/11. If you still believe terrorists flew aluminum planes into steel buildings, flew aluminum planes directly into steel buildings, causing those explosions, and that 3 skyscrapers in New York City collapsed at free fall speed with no help of explosives or anything like that, you need to review your facts. Also, the presence of thermite on the location of thermite or thermate is a explosive cord used to sever steel girders in demolition. So you would have to look at that. So he was the architect of that, not only the architect of the response, but he was the architect of the founding document, the PNAC document 10 years earlier about the new American century wouldn't happen without a new Pearl Harbor, which 9/11 was, which would give America the right to go around the world and do what it did following. He was also the architect of extraordinary rendition, which I just spoke about, which is the kidnapping of people off streets, taking them to foreign torture dungeons and having them tortured, as well as many other things, including the war in Iraq, the war in Afghanistan, et cetera, regime change around the world. He was a bad dude. I never liked Dick Cheney, and I still don't like Dick Cheney. I don't hate him now because he's dead, and I use that idea when talking about I don't hate Hitler because Hitler's dead. He died 20 years before I was even born. I don't know him. I don't approve of what he did, certainly, but I don't hate a dead man who was dead decades before my birth. You should reserve your anger for people that are living. All right, let's get to the case at hand. Now, I'm going to go through what we need to go through to explain what happened. The premise that a bunch of blue Kool-Aid drinking morons, liberals, progressives, ushered in these Democrats into office because they don't like Trump and they didn't like the shutdown, or they're afraid of their SNAP being taken away, or whatever it is. But they don't like ICE, blah blah blah. All right, that certainly could contribute to an electoral win, but that's not the reason. The reason is, in most places, although the federal government had some election poll watchers and so forth and so on, in New Jersey, I'm gonna go down what exactly happened, why it's happening, because remember, by hook or by crook, the establishment is not just going to go away, right? They're not going to give up on their agenda, on their plan, and this isn't an Occupy movement fueled getting back at the establishment kind of thing. If you know anything about socialism, socialism is the controlled opposition to the merchant class born out of the 18th century revolutions against monarchy, et cetera, et cetera. So communism, socialism is the preferred controlled opposition. And the reason it has to come into play is because of the disruptive technology of artificial intelligence, which is going to take everybody's jobs sooner or later. Now, the Wall Street Journal has the article which headline states, Wall Street couldn't stop Mayor Mamdani. Now it has to work with him. Some leading figures of the financial world spent millions to elevate other candidates in New York City mayoral race. Did they really? How do you know? How does the Wall Street Journal know? How did Zoran Mamdani, how was his campaign funded? You think little communists in the street, disaffected graduates, recent graduates, did they pony up the millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars to get Zoran Mamdani elected? Was it foreign funding? They discovered some foreign funding, but it only amounted to tens of thousands of dollars. Did the working class fund his campaign? Or was it NGOs funded by major corporations? The ones, Wall Street, was it Wall Street? Now, this is the point, is the premise that the Democrats are fronting for the establishment. And they have been ever since the establishment realized how things were shaping up for the future and how we need socialism to placate the masses while the robots take over. I know that sounds outlandish, but bear with me here. So the New York Times has a headline: in a speech full of hope, Mamdani celebrates a new political order. That's the new world order. That's the new political order. Now, I mentioned this just recently. I just talked to my wife on the phone. She was talking to people at work about what happened here in the United States politically. So what was happening, or what has happened, I'll go to the subhead. Zoran Mamdani, in his victory speech, celebrated New York's immigrants, working class, young people, and said the city could show the country how to defeat President Trump. Platitudes. This is not what it's about. It's about the new world order. The new political order is the new world order. So it's not about defeating Trump. It's about defeating individualism, particularly individual liberties. Now, why would the birthplace of liberty, political liberty is what we're talking about. I mean, it's all political, but individual liberty comes out of Christian humanism, which says every soul has worth. That's where it comes from, if you didn't know. So it's not about groups. It's not about majorities. It's not about blocks. It's not about demographics. It's about the true nature of democracy, direct democracy, one person, one vote. That's what they want to get rid of. But what I was explaining to my wife is, why is America mirroring Europe? First, it was with immigration, which there's no correlation. Millions of Muslims were driven out of their countries because of the Arab Spring. Driven into Europe, which welcomed them, most of the countries, with open arms. There were some, obviously, that didn't. Hungary, even Poland ended up collapsing to the will of the EU. So there it was legal immigration. Here it's illegal immigration. But there's no correlation. We didn't have wars in South America and in Central America that drove the immigration. This is all planned, as is what's happening now politically. In London, you had an election of the United Kingdom, effectively, England's biggest city, London. How did a Muslim mayor get elected there? And we could go down the rabbit hole about how Islam is effectively a political organization. They don't have separation between mosque and state. You'll have Muslims, as sometimes with the black community, they band together to form a political bloc, socialism, depending on the demographic, take over the government, and then benefit theirs. So with the black community, it's to benefit blacks. And with the Muslim community, it's to benefit Muslims. And you'll see this time and time again. But the question is about the correlation between Mamdani's victory and the victory of the first London mayor there. How does that happen? First of all, in London, after the waves of immigration, you had an inordinate amount of Muslims living in London. So you could say, okay, that's not the case. Again, there's no correlation because you don't have that in New York City. You don't have an overwhelming number of Muslims enough to overwhelm the other vote. It's about socialism, but specifically because in the grand plan, the intelligence agency, specifically the CIA, likes to use Islam because of its intolerance and its authoritarian nature per se. Specifically when it comes to individual rights. You can't have individual rights because you offend fill in the blank. Muslims, blacks, Jews, it doesn't matter. The point is to cause a wedge that some people don't get individual rights because fill in the blank. It's offensive or whatever. So what you do is the establishment has learned is that people have compassion. So, and it has always been the strength of the righteous to show compassion. So they use that weak link of compassion to wedge in authoritarianism. So it's the velvet glove approach here. Real Clear Politics as the headline, explaining Mamdani's appeal to the young with polling. First, the great news. Young voters have swung massively to the right over the last 3 presidential election cycles. Well, we don't see it here. President Trump won young men. In 2024, overall, voters ages 35 and younger shifted materially from the plus 37% for preference for Democrats in 2016 to only 13% in 2024, cutting the young adult margin. See, but then they're going to go on and go, in addition, new national poll of 2,100 voters ages 18 to 25 show a substantial rejection of Democrats' radicalism on key social issues, especially transgenderism and free speech, individual rights. Simultaneously, young voters express extreme frustration with the economy right now, AI, because AI knocked out the low-hanging fruit, first of all, is taking away entry-level jobs. People with no experience what they can do now can be done by AI. Creating a clear opening for Mamdani drove a campaign truck right through. Perhaps. Young voters express extreme frustration with the economy right now. Thank you, Jay Powell. Because if it wasn't for Jay Powell, we wouldn't have a problem. Because the problem is lending in great scale. And of course, free speech and transgenderism. So my point being is, if we seen this big shift to the right, which we did, how did this off-season election happen in a big swing for Democrats? I'm going to explain to you why. Because in a large part, cheated. I'm not saying that people didn't go out and vote and turn out and vote and specifically vote for change. That happened in my municipality where I don't know why they voted for some weaselly Democrat. And we already have super high taxes. We have 2 high schools in our city. Education is the biggest sap of resources. It's not a sap if you have children. It's great. I do not. So you have to fund these 2 schools. So the taxes are high, right? Plus there's a lot of other municipal offerings that cost money. But now we're going to have a Democratic mayor who is going to offer more. What happens when you offer more? Well, you have to pay for it. Not always. You can borrow it. Most cities and states are in debt. But they have to raise taxes. So that's always people, and especially young people don't know this because they haven't lived generationally through democratic regimes. which they promise all this great stuff. You're like, great, I want that. And then if you own things, you own a house, you get taxed up the wazoo. What will young people own? Maybe a car, maybe nothing. Maybe they're renting. So the fact is, if you don't own anything, oh, I won't be harmed by property tax. But you will. Because the people that own your building you're renting in, they'll be hit with a property tax. And then they'll have to raise rents. Mamdani is going to know I'm going to freeze rents. So the people will sell that building. And the only way the people could make do with buying that and return on their investment is becoming slumlords. So they don't invest in the property because the taxes are so high. The only way they can make money is to just take the rent, the frozen rent, and not upkeep the property. Just the News has the headline, Socialists will govern capitalism's capital. Here's what socialists who elected him demand. Now, this is all from the Democrat Socialists of America, their list of demands for Zoro Mamdani. Divest city pension funds from Israel bonds and securities. Withdraw city funds from banks that lend money to Israel or do business in Israel. Sounds anti-Semitic to me. I don't really care either way. End city contracts with companies that do business with Israel. Operate city-run grocery stores free from Israeli products. You know, I guess if you're worried about this. Investigate real estate agents hosting illegal sales of stolen lands in the West Bank. Evict weapons manufacturers and transporters from New York City metro area. Divest SUNY endowment, that's the College University of New York. And reinstate wrongly fired professors who, what? Criticized Israel. Dismantle Eric Adams' New York City Israel Economic Council. End repression of demonstrators and the CRG, the New York City Police Department's strategic response groups. There's more. End repression of demonstrators and SRG. Remove nonprofit status from charities that raise funds for the IDF. End New York City training with the IOF. And arrest Netanyahu and active IDF soldiers for war crimes. That sounds like a lot of anti-Semitism to me. It's okay to say, I don't think we should send tax dollars to Israel. But to go around and they want to end the repression of demonstrators, but in their list of demands, it sounds repressive to supporters of Israel or Jewish supporters to Israel. In any case, this is a trial balloon that they're going to use for the rest of the country. Socialism is the plan to administer IDF, social credit scores, etc., to a growing tyrannical leftist government that is going to be your steward, because after all the jobs are gone, you will have no economic power to do much of anything. No politicians are going to have to listen to you because you're not going to have any money to donate. Only the corporate, there's going to be corporate capitalism will exist, but if you're not part of that upper structure, you'll be down here under the blanket of municipal and state socialism. So, part of the Democrats' strategy, wily as it was, Democrats conveniently weigh ending record shutdown after socialist wins New York City race. A report overnight suggests that several moderate Senate Democrats are prepared to break ranks and vote to end what has become the longest U.S. government shutdown in history. So it only takes a few, so they don't even have to capitulate. They just have to say quietly to some people who are on the fence, go ahead now. So it won't seem like they'll capitulate. You'll just have a few break ranks. It'll end the shutdown so they can keep their stance, yet end the shutdown. The problem is, and what happened with this election was the way the media covered two things: ICE and the shutdown. So the polling of the majority of people believed it was the Republicans that were keeping the government closed, which was just the opposite. It was the Democrats who were trying to negotiate a complicated policy issue on a clean CR, which is a continuing resolution, which was just meant to keep the government open without discussing complicated policy issues, which will take months to discuss. So it was actually the Democrats, but most people believed it was the Republicans. That was one thing, and the media made them believe that, because when they did mention the shutdown, it was briefly just Republicans continue not to want to come to the table to debate health care on a clean CR. Some reporters, even Maggie Brennan on Face the Nation, probably forced by Barry Weiss, had to admit the truth of the matter. It's a clean CR. Why do you want to discuss a complicated issue like health care and keep the government shut for that? Because the Republicans said they'd be happy to debate it, which is how you discuss legislation, the Senate and House chamber. You debate it. Why would you? Because the Republicans said they're willing to debate it if you open the government. They didn't want to do it. What's the point of all this? Get to it right now. PJ Media, OpenAI's $1.4 trillion gamble to build out its computing resources. So if you didn't know anything about AI needs a lot of power and a lot of computing to function. And that's why they're building all these server farms, and they even want to build dedicated nuclear reactors to power these server farms for AI. Why is AI so important? It's not. They're trying to tell you, we got to get it before China gets it. It was just the same thing with the Soviet Union. Why do we have to do XYZ? Why do we have to have more surveillance? Why do we have to have nuclear weapons? It's all because of the Soviet Union. Meanwhile, we're feeding our adversary at the same time. Now, apparently, Marco Rubio has convinced Trump not to allow NVIDIA to sell their Blackwell chip, the new AI chip, to communist China, which is going to, they'll obviously get it, reverse engineer it, figure it out. But that's going to take time. And so that'll keep our edge in the AI race. But the point of the AI race is, do we need AI? We don't need AI. Is it neat to go onto your browser and just say, give me the answer? Is it cool the way AI can make deep fake videos? Is that something we really need? The purpose of AI is to displace human labor. That's what the $1.4 trillion gamble is for. OpenAI's founder, CEO Sam Altman, is betting big that his company can grow faster than any other company in history to build out the computer infrastructure to power his artificial intelligence models. Altman, who is looking at an astonishing $1 trillion IPO, that's an initial public offering to fund his plans. It's when you take a corporation public. Your initial public offering allows you to buy into the company, and then the company raises funds that way. Of course, they don't sell their controlling share. They just give people a taste. And also, he took his first steps by linking a $38 billion deal with Amazon Web Services. So you need the servers to power AI, but you also need the power. And they say it's OpenAI's first move away from Microsoft. They're not moving away from Microsoft. They're not moving away from Microsoft because it's still a privately held company, mostly controlled by Microsoft. So even if you give an initial public offering, you're not going to sell off your controlling share, and Microsoft isn't going to sell their controlling share. So, and I'm not going to get into the rest of the article about NVIDIA's new Blackwell chip. There's an interesting, I usually don't quote Substack, but I am going to quote the wine press here because it's relevant. Tokenization. BlackRock's Larry Fink says we're at the beginning of the tokenization of all assets. Promotes necessity of digital ID to form a social credit score. Small merchants who rely on cash payments with detailed and traceable paper trails can get better access to working capital loans, which basically means if you don't digitalize assets, and there's a purpose behind that, it's traceability, it's tokenization, which means your digital assets will be considered credits, and your credits will be managed through, will be able to manage your behavior, especially if you're getting UBI. If you do something wrong, they'll just take away your UBI. And there's a little bit, you'll see, it has a little bit to do with SNAP and EBT, but it's going to be linked. And we're going to get into that. That's the whole Communist Chinese social credit score. So you're going to understand that the Communist Chinese have already used this, and Communist China is the socialist model. Maoism, contemporary Maoism, neo-Maoism, is the socialist model to be foisted upon the American people. The point is, you can't have individual liberties. That's what they want to get away with. Gun ownership, free speech, freedom of movement, all that has to go away. Because you can't have that in a totalitarian system, because they need the totalitarian system to A, hide you away, limit your freedom of movement, and then they're going to exterminate you. It's coming. So I'm just going to briefly show you the text here. A token defined by the Bank of International Settlements, which is basically the World Bank, are entries in a database that are recorded digitally and can contain information and functionality within the token themselves, which means what you can and cannot spend the money on. Even if they don't outlaw guns and ammunition, you won't be able to buy it, especially if it's through UBI. The assets can virtually buy anything. And even the individual themselves becomes a token via digital ID. So they're assigning your digital ID, and then your money is assigned to you. And so they know who exactly is spending the money. Like when you have paper money, there's no record of who's spending it. That's why people use cash. And this is even more important. PJ Media, Grok recommends voting Democrat when given sample ballots. Why? When given sample 2025 ballots for California, Virginia, Grok official intelligence recommends voting Democrat. Why? Because it behooves artificial intelligence. What I'm talking about. It's the establishment. It's their vision of the future that is coming, regardless of Trump. Whatever Trump does, to the New World Order proponents, Trump is a bump, or now 2 bumps in the road. They're not giving up on their agenda, on their deadline, whatever. And you'll see, come 2030, the end of 2030, Christmas, you'll see. That's probably when digital currency, digital ID, all this stuff is going to go online. So if you think a Republican or liberty-minded president is going to be elected in 2028, you're wrong. Got to get rid of mail-in ballots. And that red herring of Mike Lindell went down that rabbit hole. There was a red herring about, I'm not saying that it's not, voter machine manipulation doesn't exist. Of course it does. But that was the red herring to get people distracted away from the mail-in ballots, which was the true culprit and still is today. Insider Wire shared a screenshot on X showing that when it provided a sample ballot for Virginia and asked to recommend how to fill it in, Grok recommended a straight Democrat ticket. Not only that, but when I shared part of a California sample ballot with Grok, the AI chatbot advised voting for Governor Gavin Newsom's horrendous gerrymandering proposition. That's Proposition 50. We're going to get to that in just a minute. Perry and I spoke about that last night on latest edition of Tuesdays with Perry. I wish he would have prefaced it by saying this is Proposition 50. This is how it differs from Texas. Texas is gerrymandering, but hopefully the Supreme Court will strike it down because they're going to be looking at race-based gerrymandering, which is illegal under the Constitution. So you see, the election isn't about a kinder, gentler, liberal, Democrat, progressive. The progressivism, the progress is the problem. It's not about loving transgender people or whatever, minorities or foreigners, or there's nothing to do with that. That's the delusion. That's the distraction. The progressivism is technocracy. It's while you worried about being nice to everybody, AI will treat everyone the same because everybody will be a fucking serf to the technocracy. Except, obviously, for the corporate oligarchy. And you'll see that come to pass. So the Wall Street Journal had the headline, Democrats dent Trump's coalition with 3 big election victories. Dominant electoral wins gives Democrats a jolt of energy while Republicans see a warning sign. I don't see a warning sign. I saw the warning sign back in 2020. All right, we'd never had mail-in ballots before. It's an avenue for fraud. Pandemic's over. It's been over. Did we get rid of mail-in ballots? Nope. And we're going to get to that shit in just a minute. First, Fox News, Charlotte mayor wins landslide re-election despite controversy after Irina Zarutska's slaying. Now, you might have remembered Irina Zarutska. She was the Ukrainian immigrant, beautiful young lady who got stabbed in the neck by an insane criminal who was homeless, yes, insane, yes, but also a career criminal who was let back out onto the streets. That's I have sympathy for people who are insane. I know a lot of insane people. And for homeless people and indigent, I do have sympathy and even empathy. I'm not going to digress into why I have empathy, but the problem is recidivism, especially among the insane, criminally insane, is that if someone has mental health issues and are committing crimes, they can't be on the street because they're a threat to the public. Why? Because they're fucking insane. V. Lyles captures 70% of the vote after facing criticism over response to Ukrainian refugee stabbing death on city train. Lyle's decisive win comes despite the controversy surrounding the August murder of Irina Zarutska on the city's Lynx Blue train line. After the attack, Lyles emphasized the suspect's mental health issues and homelessness rather than his criminal history. Republicans say the remarks showed that the mayor and other Democrats are too lenient towards repeat offenders. Indeed. This is what I talked about earlier about the New World Order, the establishment, the extreme intellectualism, the lack of empathy and emotion. Their cunning into using compassion as the weak link in the righteous armor of good people, of smart, strong, forthright people, or who succumb wittingly or unwittingly to the bait of compassion that leads you down this road. So you think Because someone's homeless and insane and a criminal, you think because they're insane and homeless, that's a good reason to put them back on the street? Tragic incidents like this should force us to look at what are doing across our country to address root causes. Root causes of criminality. Now, psychologically, you want to talk about root causes to behavior. I get it. There are root causes. It's like an addict or a substance abuser, the root causes for that. That's not the root. Is the substance abuse is a symptom of a greater psychological problem. Usually it's people not being able to psychologically deal with emotional upheaval. They feel a certain way about something and they don't know what to do about it. So they use substances to deaden the feeling, basically. And then it starts a whole bunch of other problems. All right, moving quite along. NBC News exit poll, voters disapprove of Trump in New Jersey, Virginia, and other key races. Listen to this. Neither political party gets strong marks from voters who are concerned about the economy, according to the early exit poll results. But they just said, exit poll results, voters disapprove of Trump. And then they say, early exit polls say people are more worried about the economy. Of course, thank you, Jay Powell. The economy would be ripping right now if A, he either promised another rate cut in December, which of course he didn't, or continued with the planned rate cuts that should have started in May or April, but even the ones that were scheduled in June, they didn't go through with. So the problem is you can't undo high prices because of inflation. The Biden administration spent $2 trillion they didn't need to spend, really more than that. That devalued the currency by 20% or more. So your dollar is worth less. Nothing to do with prices. So nobody's controlling prices. That's not going to do anything now because they can't make prices go down. Even if they control prices, they can just keep them from going up. And now inflation is under control. So NBC News, again, is falsely stating things. Now, is Trump derangement syndrome, did that help? Sure, it helped the tide, but that was not the only thing. That's not what guaranteed their victory. You think the economy would have been better under Kamala Harris? I mean, come on. One American News, Trump attributes GOP election losses to his absence from the ballot, government shutdown. Not exactly true. Just the News, Trump cites pollsters saying government shutdown, president not on the ballot, or reasons for GOP loss. And I just have to move to say one thing here. Yes, Trump moves the ballot, but the point was the amount of poll watchers that were interested in getting Trump elected were not there in this off election year. There were some, particularly in New Jersey, where they thought Ciattarelli had a chance. But I'm going to get to that. Now, there are a few things that added to the sour mood of the electorate. Not only the shutdown and, things attributed to Trump, which wrongfully so with the shutdown, but ICE and, we wanted the illegals out and shutting the border, but no one was getting points for that because it wasn't portrayed in the media. But there was more. There's the shutdown also dealing with the FAA. So, which I believed was sabotage here. A UPS cargo plane crashes in Louisville, killing at least 9. The plane crashed and exploded shortly after taking off from a Kentucky airport, disrupting operations at the delivery's main air cargo hub. Now, is there going to be an investigation by NTSB? Hope so. Sounds like sabotage to me because they needed this right before the election to say, see, because of Trump's shutdown, for some reason it was Trump's, the GOP shutdown is really the Democrats, planes are falling out of the sky because that was predicted. Not only that, but there was more. Now, this was out of LaGuardia. It was in New York, but that it helps Mamdani, helps New Jersey as well. How this is attributed, I'm not quite sure, but Delta flight at LaGuardia evacuated after bomb threat. Second scare at major U.S. airport on same day. Where was the other airport? I thought I had text for this. There was another bomb scare. I believe it was at a New Jersey airport. 2 bomb scares in 2 important racist states, and those planes had to be grounded. Does this news affect the election? Ask yourself this. If it were, to what degree and who would it benefit? Anything dealing with travel right now will benefit the Democrat. And people are worried about Islamic terrorism as well, because there's been a spike globally and in the U.S., and I'm going to get to that. But first, let's get to this. The Hill. Hashmi wins Virginia lieutenant governor's race. That's under Spanberger. Will be first Muslim woman to hold statewide office. Why is this happening? Why does she have any appeal whatsoever? So in a lot of state elections, you vote for the lieutenant governor and the governor. So just because the governor wins, they don't bring in their lieutenant governor. It's elected on the ballot. So, but she won in a sweep. So Spanberger is an ex-CIA spook. If you know the affiliation between the CIA and Islamic extremism, you'd understand why. Do you know that a congressperson, what the hell is her name? The girl with the turban. Where did she go for a year and a half, 2 years before she got into politics? You see this a lot on the left. People disappear for a year. All of a sudden they come back. They're very articulate about political issues, and they have funding, and they're all set up with their neuro-linguistic programming effort. So here you have, in Virginia, a Muslim lieutenant governor elected and a CIA officer, ex-CIA officer. Once in the agency, always in the agency, if you've ever heard that. So you see this way it's shaping up, and you have to understand is that the intelligence operations and agencies are ruled by the donor class, by the corporations. They're on the agenda. If you ever talk to CIA officers, I've talked to ex-CIA officers, there's the old school that thought they were fighting communism, and the new school, which isn't that new school. I mean, since the 50s, since since the CIA began, they've been pushing communism under the guise of fighting communism. It's very complicated, but you look into the John Birch Society, John Birch, and what happened to him, and that was really the turning point of why you need to understand how MI5 or MI6 really, CIA and other Western agencies and the NATO intelligence agencies, how they push communism or even act like communists or pretend to be communists or Muslim terrorists, et cetera, et cetera. That's why ISIS is contained. But I don't want to go down that rabbit hole just yet, how the CIA funded madrasas in Pakistan that taught young Muslim kids to hate America and all this stuff. So let's move to a New York Times article here. In an upset, Democrats oust 2 Republicans on Georgia's utility board. The races for 2 of the 5 seats on the Georgia Public Service Commission are seen as a bellwether for midterms. Not really. Why is that? Is because, again, Georgia is and has been the site, because it's turning purple, is the site of big election malfeasance, cheating, etc. We know this. We see this battle going on with Harmeet Dillon and the Department of Justice trying to get records regarding to the 2020 election. And they never insisted on cleaning it up. And that's why I knew that Warnock was going to beat Herschel Walker in the Senate runoff, because they didn't do anything about the cheat in November. And it continues. New York Post. Newsom's Prop 50 vanity project overwhelmingly passes, with Dems looking to flip 5 congressional seats in the 2020 midterms. What's happening here? Okay, what is Prop 50? Prop 50 says for the next 8 years that Californians can the Democrats, because they control the state, can redistrict to their heart's content in an effort to unseat Republicans in Congress. So even in my state, it was okay to allow like a token amount of Republicans, so it didn't look like it was a one-party takeover, which is what they want. So they kept them around, say, look, we allow, the voters to decide. Not true. Proposition 50 is a bad thing. And One American News reports Trump's unconstitutional California redistricting voting involving mail-in ballots is rigged. Indeed, this is what I'm talking about, and will face legal criminal review. It is. There was cheated across the board in this off-season election, and that's what I'm talking about. Is while no one was watching, but people were watching. He had the post on Truth Social, the unconstitutional redistricting. Trump did. This is his post from Truth Social. Unconstitutional redistricting vote in California is a giant scam, and an entire process, and particularly the voting itself, is rigged. All mail-in ballots where the Republicans in the state are shut out and is under very serious legal and criminal review. Stay tuned. So he's going to have the Justice Department look at it. Great. I'm glad. I'm really glad. So, and that's my point, is that it wasn't just Democrat distaste with the Trump administration, the TDS. We know that's going to help the Democrats. But stop saying it's just because of stupid people in the electorate are doing these things. It's not just that. It's more. It's cheating. We have to get rid of mail-in ballots. That's the fly in the ointment of our democracy. When Democrats constantly say Trump is eroding democracy, that's a bunch of bullshit. Democracy is a fucking process. And for having ballots floating around outside of chain of custody is fucking bullshit. We saw what happened in 2020, and there's an investigation going on right now through the Justice Department, and we know that states aren't turning over subpoena documents because they know it's going to show what we know it's going to show. Cheating. I mean, why would Democrat states go, we like mail-in ballots. We don't want people to prove that they're legally voting. All right, a post-millennial Dem trans activist wins mayoral race in Pennsylvania, suggests armed violence against government is coming. She says, I foresee a violent pushback from an armed citizenry in the future. So take all their fucking guns. The Second Amendment, folks, were very clear that weapons are meant to oppose tyrannical government. Indeed. It is. But this is the thing, is that you're training the government to work against the people in a republic. You can't do it. You can't do it. And why would the people rise up? Because they feel that they're being unfairly treated, let's say, and cheating in the democratic process. to install a tyrannical government to oppress the people, what do you think is going to happen? Eventually. But it all depends. At that point, people will be so brainwashed. You know, with Project Bluebeam and the alien, the space alien Christ coming down, that people will be so bamboozled by that, they won't be paying attention to what's happening. Because it's going to be stealth. It's only if people wake up to the stealth program that they'll go, oh my God, what happened? And just like they're going to do now, people are not with it. They're not paying attention. Now, let's get to the crux of the matter again. Just the news. Maine voters reject voter ID. Approve red flag laws. Well, what's a red flag law? Red flag law says that anybody, your cousin, neighbor, your coworker, the Starbucks barista, if they know you have guns, they don't think you should have guns, they can report you to the government and raise a red flag. Then, by law, the government can come to your house and take away all your firearms. Then, you'll have a hearing in court, you'll get your due process, and then the court will decide, the liberal judge will decide whether or not you can get your guns back. Bullshit. And of course, we know voter ID. How fucking ridiculous. Now, you don't want to have voter ID? Fine. If you fucking register to vote, you better have to show your ID and proof of citizenship. I think you should have voter ID. When I went and voted yesterday, what did they say? Can I see your ID? Sure. Why not? But that doesn't matter because they're giving driver's licenses to illegal immigrants and they're not asking for proof of citizenship. So you just have to check a box. Are you a citizen? Sure. I think there should be proof of citizenship during registration. So this is the unwinding of the democratic process. Everyone here should be allowed to vote. If they're a citizen, they're not a citizen. Whatever. They exist, they don't exist. Dogs should be able to vote. I saw another news story. I forget where it was. I think it was post-millennial. Or maybe Perry sent it to me. A dog got to vote. You know, the dog didn't go into the poll, obviously, and fill out the little bubble. But a ballot was sent to his address, and it was returned. Washington Times, judge orders Trump to restart sign language interpreters for the White House briefings. I just thought this was funny because the sign language interpreters is a stupid liberal fucking thing. So how many deaf people are in the audience? Because that's what it's there for. If people are watching on TV, you could have closed caption. Or if they're watching on YouTube, you could have closed caption, right? It's just virtue signaling. You don't need it. How many deaf? And again, it's like the transgenderism thing. How many people are you catering to? 0.001%? And the judge says you have to. All right. I keep saying crux of the matter. Here it comes. The Federalist. Bomb threats and bad ballots mark Election Day in New Jersey. Here's the point. Democrats are once again trying to change election rules at the last minute to count ineligible ballots. They're cheating. It's called cheating. The threats were sent to polling. Listen to this. The threats were sent to polling locations in 7 New Jersey counties, including Passaic, where the U.S. Department of Justice had sent federal election monitors, according to law enforcement officials. Voting was halted temporarily as law enforcement responded with election officials switching polling sites to meet what was determined to be a non-credible threat. So the election monitors had to move from that location. Mail-in ballots continue to be an issue in New Jersey's 2025 gubernatorial election. On Tuesday, the Republican National Committee intervened in a lawsuit filed by Democrats demanding that the Bergen County Board of Election disregard state election law and allow some 300 voters to cure or correct their mail-in ballots that were returned with unsealed envelopes. Against the law. As attorneys for the New Jersey Republican Party argue, the relief requested by the New Jersey Democrat State Committee does not stand under a previous appellate court holding that the state election law does not permit voters to cure mail-in ballots to come in and correct them that are missing information required by the inner envelope. Plain and simple. Democrats are once again trying to change election rules at the last minute to count ineligible ballots. And whether these are legitimate or not legitimate ballots, they're ineligible or legitimate voters. You can't call up the voter and go, hey, you fucked up here. You didn't fill in the bubble all the way or whatever it is. It's fucking bullshit. Then come into the polling place and vote. It's cheating. More from the Federalist. After assassination fantasies, Virginia elects Democrat Jay Jones as Attorney General. Again, stupid and bad. I don't know what the fuck is wrong with people, but it doesn't matter because they're issued in, they're pushed in, they're nudged in by cheating. PJ Media, articles of impeachment filed against rogue Judge Boasberg. This is good news. Representative Brandon Gill, Republican of Texas, will formally introduce articles of impeachment against radical left-wing judge, U.S. District Judge James Boasberg, for what he calls the judge's corrupt and unethical role in the so-called Arctic frosting investigation. Not only that, but he was involved in prosecuting Trump as well. Chief Judge Boasberg has compromised the impartiality of the judiciary and created a constitutional crisis. He's shamelessly weaponizing his power against his political opponents, including Republican members of Congress who are faithfully serving the American people within their jurisdiction. Yeah, people are fucking nuts. Because it doesn't matter. Remember what I said at the beginning, by hook or by crook. The establishment, using the Democratic Party, is trying to win at all costs. So anybody who's part of the conspiracy, judges and others, are going to do what needs to be done. If you don't know what's coming, also, Just the News is reporting Trump tariff challengers seek to make arguments in SCOTUS in a case that could reshape administration strategy. So this is another thing. The chief executive has the right to form trade policy. It's part of foreign policy. I don't understand why this is even being taken up by the Supreme Court. Hopefully the Supreme Court rules correctly, but if John Roberts has to say, who knows? The court's decision could have a wide-ranging impact on the president's trade policy. Right, it's administrative policy. It's administration policy. And trade negotiations with hundreds of countries around the world because it is administration policy. The Republicans control the administration. They don't have the right to conduct trade policy. Trade policy is foreign policy. Foreign policy is under the purview of the administration, period. Just the News again, FBI probing classified Trump-Russia evidence in burn bags, including Comey memo reveals. If you didn't know what was happening here back in July, they uncovered these burn bags. What does it mean? Nothing really, because they were hidden. They weren't hidden. They were left to be discovered by Comey. That's what some of the Trump Epstein information was in these burn bags, but also a lot of information around Crossfire Hurricane. But the evidence in there has been tainted because it was left there, most likely by Comey and his underlings. So I don't know how credible the information is there. The chain of custody, the collection efforts are not documented. Just a roundup follow-up on this story. One American News, Massachusetts, 2 suspects arrested and identified following Harvard Medical School explosion. And they say they're young people. I think they're students at the school, but it's not clear. Their names weren't released and motive wasn't released. So, but they've arrested 2 people and they're not minors. So I don't know why they didn't release their names or whether or not they're students there. But it was a firework that was set off in a locker in the medical building. CIA director, Senate Intel chairman says Trump is right about secret Russian nuclear testing. Yep. So we're just responding on that. I mean, it's not surprising. These are enemies, but it gets stickier. Keep that in mind. But before I should have matched this up with the other articles. Before I get to that, this One American News article, White House looking into UK's BBC over deliberate editing of Trump's January 6th speech made it look like he endorsed violence. Why did BBC do that? Because BBC is a state organization. State organization is run by the propaganda unit of MI6. MI6 is, again, controlled by the corporate elite. As I said previously, the corporate elite control MI6 and the CIA. They want Trump to look bad, so they edited the speech to make it look like he was endorsing violence when we know he didn't. So, and things that the American government cannot do, that they have ally intelligence agencies, they have them do. There's no rule against that. More foreign news. The Telegraph. Driver shouting Allahu Akbar plows through crowds on French holiday island. 4 critically injured after a man hits pedestrians and cyclists on the island of Oleron. And that's in the Atlantic off the coast of France. All right, let's get to what was a real concern toward the end of Tuesdays with Perry episode last night. And that is this headline from Miami Herald. China backs Venezuela. Trump hints Maduro's end is near as tensions escalate. And the Telegraph again. Russia open to sending hypersonic missiles to Venezuela. Now, Perry and I talked about this. He said that he had information that the missiles have already been sent. And this is MERV technology missiles. This is intercontinental missile technology to strike the United States outright. So it's a new Cuban Missile Crisis. Weapon capable of carrying a nuclear warhead among those that could be dispatched to tackle Trump's drug offensive. Holy shit. And Reuters, China rolls back, suspends retaliatory measures against some U.S. entities. That's a 24% tariff that was levied against American companies. And like I said, it's specific industries here. So it's a sector concentrated tariff. Thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave a comment. Share the podcast. Thanks for joining me today. Join me every day, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. live on Rumble. I will have an episode tomorrow, but I don't think Friday. I got a job. I got a big job on Friday. It's going to take me all day, so have to do the worky before sharing this crucial information with you. Remember, you're under attack psychologically, biologically. Stay hip to the trick. Thanks for joining me today on this Wednesday episode. Yeah, we went over 10 minutes. It was a long episode and I started late. Sorry about that. So join me tomorrow. Hope to see you tomorrow. Respect.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
You can't handle the truth.
The New World Order. The New World Order.
I'm an American. I have rights.